coming along, that, you know, these companies can see more of a long-term proposition than what they have in the past.
Fabio, because you were, that's your...
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that because
bring us back, folks. I'm going to bring us back. I apologize, Graham sent me the wrong link. So I'm off, we're off again. So let's start the event formally and say, first of all, a big welcome to everyone. And I will probably punch Graham later for sending me the wrong thing, but that's the way it goes. And we're being agile as always, and this is part of our Agile Leaders series. And we've had a fabulous week where we had, I think it was on Wednesday, Graham, we had a fantastic session where we talked about cell and gene therapy, and the week is in memorial, well, I wouldn't like to use the word immemorial, but it's remembering our normal JP Morgan adventure, which starts normally it's normally annually at this time, and we all meet and we start the year with some aplomb and find out what's going on, and it's all about being in the know. And these sessions that we've built and the famous Coffee Buddies community is all about building a community who's in the know. And today's going to be like that. So it's an in the know session, and the first part of the session is going to be on cell and gene therapy, and I'm delighted to have a fantastic group of people to chew it over. And then the second part we're going to move into is my friend Max, where if he can wave on the screen, is he there?
Yeah, he's there.
He's always in San Francisco. My dear friend Max, who's kindly offered to have a look with analyst's eyes at what's happened at JP Morgan. And then after that, we're going to have some lovely thoughts from Sue and Mike Ward about what Max is saying, and Emma, and about what's happening on the ground in terms of how do you get noticed in the digital world, which as we're missing JP Morgan. And that's really, then we're going to do serendipity, and then we're going to wind up, and I'm going to have about 5 gin and tonics, although this is dry January. And,
I thought you would kind of come around here and you know, hit me or something for not logging you in properly.
I can't with social distancing, so don't worry.
Okay.
On that note, Graham, have I missed you, my friend?
I think you're bang on at the moment, so you're doing really good. So if you just lead into the panel and start introducing people.
Introduce the panel. So of the panel, first of all, Arvind. Where's Arvind? Do you want to say hi to the folks and just say
hi?
What
So I'm a business development at BioNtech, so doing vaccine work, and pleased to say that Pfizer's changed its logo to a double helix to reflect that. I don't know if you saw the new launch of the Pfizer logo, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's a great logo. Congrats.
Yeah.
Very interesting that. So that's introducing number one, and then next Philippe or Philip.
Philippe, half French, fun enough, so that you got that. Yes, so I'm Phillip Ridley-Smith. I'm the sales and marketing director for Cobra Biologics. So very, very pleased to be sponsoring this. It was a fantastic Wednesday. Cobra, just shortly, we're a CDMO in the cell and gene therapy area. We just put out a press release, funnily enough, yesterday. We're expanding considerably, over 250,000 square feet in both the US, UK and Sweden. So offering cell therapy, increased viral vector production and DNA.
Perfect. So that's really good. So moving along, we've got Fabio. Fabio.
Hello, everyone. I live in the UK, but I work with Claris Ventures, which is a new VC fund based in Italy and focused entirely on therapeutics. For those of you who don't know me already, I've been focusing on cell and gene therapy for the past 10 years on a number of projects, from supporting investors to manufacturing and even research work. And certainly thank you, Graham and Tony, for inviting me to this interesting meeting.
Fantastic. So moving around the table, we've got Charlotte. Charlotte, where's Charlotte?
Hello, great to
there's Charlotte. There's Charlotte. Yeah.
Great to meet everyone. Great to be here. I'm Charlotte. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Theolytics, which is a drug discovery company based in Oxford, based on viral therapeutics. I also sit on the board of the Bioindustry Association, and a big focus, I think, for the whole ecosystem at the moment is how we can build up and make the most of our cell and gene therapy capabilities here in the UK. So excited to contribute to the discussion today.
Fantastic. And from a clinical point of view, we have my dear friend Panteli.
Yes, hello everyone. Panteli Theocharous. I'm the cell and gene therapy strategy lead for PPD Global CRO. My role is an enterprise-wide role, and we're engaging with a number of different clients that are developing advanced therapies across all phases of drug development. So looking at things both strategically as well as clinically, and certainly have the patient very much in mind with regards to these processes.
Fantastic. And last but not least, James from Auxolytic. Is it Auxolytics, James? I can't hear you. Are you muted, or is it?
Yeah, you're muted, James.
Yeah, sorry about that. Joined as
so you're young as well. You know, you're meant to get this kind of stuff right.
Don't bring age into
usually I join the meeting and I'm not muted, but yeah, we seem to auto mute. Hi everyone. I'm James Patterson. I'm a founder of Auxolytic, and Auxolytic is a company developing a safety switch for cell therapies based on the principle of auxotrophy, which is sort of a nutrient-based control system for cell therapies.
Fantastic. So, I mean, let's start the round robin. I mean, so my goodness, there's a lot going on, and this year has been explosive, and a lot of it is catalytic. You know, what's been brought to our attention has come from the great work of BioNtech and others. And so, Arvind, maybe you could start by just sharing a little bit of, if you like, the experience of this year. I know we did it in part one, but people are very fascinated, I think. And I suppose understanding this concept of how you did it, taking the risks you did.
Yeah, well, not me personally, obviously, but the company started working. It's not too much of a stretch. We talk about clinical trials being on hold. We've had 12 clinical trials that were meant to be planned in 2020 that have been on hold because of Corona. And I think a lot of companies have experienced that. We just happen to also be working on COVID vaccine, which we started thinking about in November and started seriously working on in December. And as a small company, we were only sort of 500 to 700 people, but it's not small as in biotech, but it's small for a pharma company, 500 to 700 people. And we started working on COVID. And Ugor Sahin, who's this is his second big company. He decided, he goes, science drives everything first. I think that's the policy of the company, and it makes it really exciting that the science rules. So he said, well, we're going to take at least four things into the clinic, 4 different versions of the spike protein to say which one works best, and then we'll naturally select that, and then we'll take 2 into phase 2. Or, you know, there was an awful lot of work done at risk, and that was, I think, the biggest gamble we did. We did all of this at risk. Pfizer approached us as partners because they had all the sales and marketing. There's no RNA approved drug at the time. So it was useful to have someone as powerful as Pfizer on your side. The other value of Pfizer is that they already knew us. We already have an alliance with them for over a year now in the flu space. So it was really helpful to say, okay, we know the CEOs knew each other, the project teams sort of had a sense of who they were. So the negotiation actually was start to finish done in 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, it was just incredible type of speed. Crazy. I mean, considering the number of times you do a license agreement, it can take you 9 to 12 months to get a signature. To do this in that time, it was almost 24/7 to get it going. So the speed at which things done have been immense. The teamwork and the collaborative work required has been immense. And actually the support from everybody around us has been pretty cool, right? I think we put a press release out at the beginning of this year, just thanking everyone who has supported the project. And the list of companies was over 100, right? So from manufacturing to syringes to glass vials. And today what we face is the logistics of how to get it to people. And that everyone goes, oh, you've got nothing to do. And I'd have to say it's exactly the opposite. There's a lot more complicated things now, which are totally new to us as a company in terms of production and supply. So, but it's really been exciting to be part of it.
Fantastic. And if I bridge that on to Philip or Philippe, as I'm going to call him now. Philippe, I mean, this idea of.
Do you want him coming back as a sponsor, Tony, or not?
No, I think he likes French. He likes being French. So, you know, Philippe, I mean, you know, if you look at what we were bridging there is I mean, the world has seen that you can get technology, but how do you actually get it manufactured, and how do you get it filled and finished? I mean, this is something then that's really hit you as a hypothesis or a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess these technologies like Arvind's, you know, with BioNtech, Moderna, the AstraZeneca Oxford one, and many others were technologies that were there. I mean, I think there has to be a realization that this was not invented overnight. The technologies were there, and it is a challenge for the manufacturing. So, you know, we get approached, say, you know, can you make this? And people forget that is probably the biggest challenge that any product faces at its early stage is, can you actually make it? It is not a simple task. And so, you know, that's where the importance of thinking and planning about manufacturing as early as possible is absolutely critical. The benefits with these, and the reason why these vaccines have come out so quickly is not only the initial hard work that Arvind's team and other teams around the world have carried out, was that there was an understanding of how these products should be manufactured. And also the huge thing that came out of this was just the depth and enormity of collaboration that was carried out. You know, we'd been working on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine since March, and I think everyone just did not understand the goodwill and what people were prepared to move in order to make it work. And I think, Arvind, you've mentioned this before. I mean, I don't think we had understood how deep and how powerful that collaboration would be.
Yeah, and bridging, Phil, then to Fabio. And I mean, Fabio, from an investor point of view and the work you do, have you been looking at, I mean, you're looking at an innovative biotech that's changing the way it operates. You're looking at manufacturing that is now being seen very centrally as a pivot point. I mean, are you looking at it and thinking, well, we need to put more money into development, really, and help these companies? What's the investment perspective?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Tony. Actually, cell and gene therapy specifically is an area where manufacturing is even more important, because there are still some issues with the manufacturing that we don't have with other modalities. I remember the first event for investors that I attended in 2015. And I remember that even back then, many investors, VCs of like managing partner of large VCs, they were saying that there was a lack of manufacturing capacity, and if they were not doing what they were doing, like being a managing partner of a large VC fund, they would actually have actually started a CDMO. So fast forward 5 years, we've seen many more CDMOs opening, existing one like Cobra expanding, also with the acquisition by Cognate. But on the so certainly I think when everything will be over and in terms of COVID, from a manufacturing point of view, let's say the cell therapy industry will be in a better place. So certainly stronger from a manufacturing point of view. And certainly there are more investors that before they were not considering investing in life science, now they are considering, and a few also interested exactly in CDMOs, investing in CDMOs. The world, let's say, knows that we need more manufacturing capacities. On in a way, the downside is that because of COVID, and I think Arvind actually mentioned that as well. So COVID put on hold all the clinical trials unless they were sort of related to COVID somehow. That kind of disrupted some of the smaller CDMO, some of the smaller biotech companies that had to hold their clinical trial for basically a year. And from a funding perspective, that stresses and strain a little bit the funding strategy and the development of a company. Some of those companies had to raise some bridge funding, and that's never really ideal for a biotech. So that, let's say, the downside of this situation. But again, when I guess that when everything will be over, we'll have clinical trials will be back on, and we'll have a stronger manufacturing infrastructure for all medicinal products, including cell and gene therapy.
Fantastic. Now, and moving on to clinical, Panteli, I mean, from a clinical perspective, I mean, you've been looking at what's going on. Have you thought, my goodness, we're redesigning the way we do clinical trials? Have you thought that, or have you thought all that we've done is taken out procrastination?
No, I think we've had to we've had to think creatively. You know, I think we've had to focus on, you know, to some extent, innovation when we look at you know, how quickly we need to you know, look at and develop the science. And I think the science is absolutely fascinating, and that's what kind of drives us as a motivator. But if I think about things very operationally, you know, we, as an organization, you know, we were involved in probably more than 100 clinical trials in COVID-19. And who I would also applaud is the operations teams. You know, how do you get clinical trial sites up and running very quickly in order to enroll the patients, collect the data, you know, and ensure that, you know, there really is that rigor around the data, because as we know, it had to be packaged and submitted and approved by the regulators in record time. So I think we also had to look at ways of engaging sites and investigators in a completely different manner. You know, how do we get operations teams to sites with some degree of risk, but how do we mitigate that? And how do we leverage technology and digital applications in order to collect data from patients that historically we weren't being asked to do? Yeah. So I think innovation certainly played a part, but also that speed, efficiency, and not compromising patient safety and quality of data. So we've had to look at things differently, Tony.
And thanks, Panteli. And if we look, Charlotte, from your perspective, I mean, you're observing. Are you observing, you know, a change? I know you've just raised some money. Graham was telling me, so congratulations. So, I mean, what are you seeing? The eyes of the world are changing, and the viruses as vectors as well as diseases are becoming more and more interesting.
I think it's been a really, firstly, thank you for the congratulations. We're thrilled, and I think it's been a very interesting time actually to be a virology company. You know, our primary focus is in the oncology space. We work on oncolytic viruses primarily, but I think what we've seen over the last year is a huge uptick in appreciation, awareness, understanding of the potential behind some of these virus-based products, and especially, you know, with the approval of ChAdOx, I think, you know, what is possible for adenovirus-based products. Our platform is primarily adenovirus focused, has been really, really interesting. You know, we're not getting actually a lot of the questions that we historically have got around feasibility of manufacturing and you know, distribution and that kind of thing relating to our technology, because there's a much broader awareness now, I'd say, of you know, with some of the fantastic work that's been going on, how effectively and efficiently these types of therapies can be developed and manufactured. And I think the other thing, just to kind of amplify some of the points that have already been brought across, from the Bioindustry Association side of things, it has been so inspiring to see our industry rally and to come together, and just the effort that's gone into coordinating things like the UK Vaccine Task Force, I think has just been incredible, a real call to action, I think, and everybody has just stepped up in such phenomenal ways. Perhaps the last point I'd add in there would be, there's been an interesting kind of strategic pull, and we've seen lots of, I think, companies kind of pivot and focus energies on COVID related solutions. And so I'd probably just add in there that it's been interesting and challenging from a company perspective as to how much you adapt to the current kind of challenge that is front and focus when you've got quite a flexible platform like we do, versus staying on course on your original area. And I've seen lots of companies go different ways, so that's been quite interesting, I think, with investor pull and
Yeah, fantastic. And James, as a company that's starting, I mean, are you seeing that is there a slipstream you can get into?
Well, the work we do isn't actually particularly related to COVID and is more difficult to sort of pivot into. But I'd say we've been lucky in that most of the work we had to do to validate the platform happened before people had trouble getting into labs. So we didn't get held up too much on that front. However, I think, as has been said, I think the general trend in the industry with everyone getting very excited about biotechnology, that we've definitely noticed, with there being much more interest in what we're doing, much more interest in the cell and gene therapy space. So that's been particularly exciting. But overall, I'd say for us, it's been more of a hamper with, I have another thing I'm working on, and our laboratories have had to shut because of the space we were in. That's made things difficult. So it's not just the sort of clinical trials, but also on the sort of basic science side, getting people into labs and actually doing the science has been sort of a major difficulty.
Yeah, no, that's true. Going around, thanks, James. Going right back to Arvind. So, I mean, if you look at your experience, is the experience a one-off, Arvind? Is it a bit like when we called to action with AIDS, but we never really got to call to action with antibiotics and antimicrobials? Is this the beginning of something new, or is this a one-off?
So I think you have to put in context that antibiotics are cheap as chips, right? And so the competitive market to try and develop a new antibiotic is quite challenging, right? There's a lot of existing therapies. I think the HIV analogy is a fair one. It was transformative. And I think the RNAs have been, the siRNAs, mRNAs, technologies have been bubbling under. It's been mentioned more than once today, bubbling under here. And it just needed to get validation. I think we were hindered as a company by saying, oh, it's an untested technology. And what the vaccine has done, and getting approval at this unprecedented rate because of the pandemic, means that future RNA therapies will be expanded. It's a bit like CRISPR, I think. Once saw some effect, there was a snowball effect of applying it in many ways in many places. And I think that's what we'll see with RNA therapeutics, that it was waiting to happen, and now it's had its break. That's what I'd say, in kind of that kind of analogy.
I mean, is that what you see, Philip?
Yeah, I think I see that. I mean, suddenly, potentially 3 new vaccine technologies have been thrusted onto this world. So you've got the mRNA, you've got the viral vectors, you've got the DNA, and then layered on top of that, you've now got the second generation of potential vaccines coming through. So everyone, there was literally a mad rush. Sequence a spike, get the spike protein, great, we've got that. Let's put it into our technology. Let's get it manufactured, and that that was essential. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are now with the vaccines that are being made available. But then there's this second generation coming through, where we're seeing the variants that are coming out, and so there is a move to to have vaccines that are, I guess, in essence, more flexible on that front. I mean, I'm not a clinician on that, so I can't say what's the absolute benefits or negative side to that. But that's what we're seeing in terms of the manufacturing side. We're working on another 4 DNA vaccines. I know one person here from ScanCell. You know, it's Sally Adams is here. She could probably explain it a lot better than me. But that's the type of second generation vaccine that is potentially out there too.
I mean, one of the things all of us have experienced is the fashion of our sector. I mean, Fabio, as an investor, I mean, do you see that this is going to skew the way that investments go, and everyone's going to look for something with NA in it to invest in?
Well, like, let's say that VCs do like investing and following trends. Of course, we cannot generalize, but I think that's certainly a thing in the investment world. But I do agree with what Arvind just said, that it's going to be a validation. So now it's going to be much easier for a startup to convince an investor to invest in that technology, because there is a validation. Much faster, like that got approved very quickly because of the pandemic, but certainly this is gonna fast track and facilitate all the other similar technologies, even if they're not necessarily a vaccine and not necessarily for infectious disease. The other thing I wanted to comment actually right now, it was, yes, second generation, and ScanCell, for example, could be an example of this second generation. But the reason why I'm thinking about ScanCell is still connected to BioNtech, and is the immunity duration. So at the very beginning, when we were talking with Tony and Arvind, it was about why the stock price is not picking up. And okay, because once, and I think Arvind said, if I interpreted correctly, that because once you vaccinate all the population, you don't need the vaccine anymore. But what if you need a second, like another dose, let's say after a year, because they give you just one, like 1 year immunity, for example. And so I just, let's say I answer with another question to Arvind and say, okay, how do you see this, this scenario of a potential need for a new dose for a further vaccination?
Yeah, I think time will tell. I think that, so currently both variants are vaccine covers, right? So the data's been published on that, and we'll keep track on it. But I think it will turn into the way flu vaccines are done. And just like seasonal flu, it moves with the year and winter moving on. There'll be incredible, like Siemens have got some incredible technology for monitoring stuff. There's an awful lot of people out there in that space for monitoring the change in antigens. And I think all countries will contribute to that change in antigens and will monitor it. And what you've also seen in these RNA, DNA, whatever technologies, it's very easy just to change the sort of tape cassette that goes inside the vaccine. So you'll be able to roll out in a more controllable manner to the different regions an updated vaccine. So at the moment, flu vaccine, you go, oh, this one's pretty good for this year's flu, and that one's okay for this flu, and this is a really good one. You'll have customized flu vaccines for each year, so you'll know you'll be protected. So I think that's how the world will change.
Just, I mean, Arvind, we've talked a lot about for many years plug and play. We've always had this discussion, but a question to you, and then I'll ask the other panelists. I mean, does the economics work for this sort of? I mean, with the vaccine, it's an existential need. The economics are different. But I mean, is any of this COVID vaccine stuff changed our view of we want to go into niche products and charge high prices, or what's happened to the economics? And
so I think, you have to realize BioNtech before COVID was working in oncology and rare disease. So it's, so in the rare disease space, for example, now there's gene therapy. So you go, okay, why should we be in rare disease then? The reality is, do you really want a gene therapy of rare disease? Do you want some control? And the question in rare disease, it's perfect for replacement therapy, right? It's a very simple validation. You're missing a gene, you've got an incorrect protein, and now you're expressing it. So for rare disease, there is a case for an RNA or a DNA therapeutic. In the same way, we're looking at, FixVac, and we have all these different cancer therapies where we have very specific antigens for specific cancers to treat them with minimal side effects. The concern I've always had, even before joining BioNtech in the oncology space, is how on earth are you going to keep reimbursing people with lots of combination therapies, all adding on this antibody plus this antibody and your PD-1 on top? Whereas an RNA therapeutic, I guess, long-term, if you go for the science fiction, once you've got long-term stability, and it can be all at 4 degrees, whatever, is that you could have customized RNAs that don't give you side effects, but give you cure. And I think that's what will change, is the standard of what you get to get reimbursed will have to change based on the efficacies of the product in order to get pricing.
I mean, Panteli, from the clinical side, I mean, do you sense that there's any view of physicians about what's going on here in terms of the long term? Do you think it's going to change in any way? Are the economics going to change, and what I want to know is how do you fit in these more expensive therapies, which we know are going to be expensive, but they're what we call niche busters, and how do niche busters fit into the new world, really?
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting. We conducted a podcast a few weeks ago with Lorna Warwick, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Lymphoma Coalition, a global patient advocacy group, very, very topical with regards to CAR-T in lymphoma. And this, I think, is predicated on what we were doing 20, 25 years ago in transplant, where you think about curative intent for patients. And I agree. I think there are a number of different dynamics here. We think about the promise of cell and gene therapy, particularly in rare disease, where we need to be motivated, we need to be inspired because of what we can be doing for patients. But I think certainly in my engagement with a myriad of different companies, the science is absolutely compelling, and we can talk about really impressive response rates. If you think about JP Morgan and some of the presentations, in the CAR-T space specifically, we're talking about 80 to 90% overall response rate. But my question is, and it's still very relevant to gene therapy, how does that actually translate to long-term durable responses? Because if we can define that, then we can talk about curative intent for patients. But I think, Tony, to your point about pricing or reimbursement, I think it's also going to come down to process, cost of goods, manufacturing, all of those other key drivers that will be inputs into the overall framework of getting these products to patients. And that's really the bottom line.
That's a good point. I mean, Charlotte, from your point of view, do you see that getting to clinical trial is quicker for you now? Has this inspired you that you can just go into clinical trial with safety quickly and then do as much as you can in clinic?
I think, it's always obviously going to be a balance in terms of ensuring that we're as confident as we possibly can be that our product is safe before we go into patients. I think a key difference with us is, for example, we work with replicating vectors, which is a little bit different, obviously, in terms of safety profile than some of these other products. I think one thing that has been demonstrated here is we've got kind of $3 a dose vaccines, in some instances from some of the viral based approaches. And that's incredible in terms of accessibility for a global population. And I think, what has been demonstrated is that we can be innovative and create creatively, but I think that can never get in the way ultimately of protecting patient safety. and making sure all the steps are being taken. Just in this instance, I think because it's been a sole focus and everything else has been dropped, we've been able to move phenomenally fast whilst also ticking those boxes. So I'm hopeful would probably be my response.
Just one thing from our part one we had, it feels like the financing plan is such that we really will be getting things into the clinic quicker, like when we used to say everything needed to, you know, every day was worth so many millions. It was all about time. So that, whereas when we were burnt by that, so then we stopped doing it and tried to do more of what I call exploratory medicine. So it feels like maybe we're going to get some of these things out quicker into the clinic. I mean, does this inspire you, James, in your work, that you'll be getting things through quicker than you would have done?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if we can get things through quicker, that's obviously a great benefit. I mean, from the Auxolytic side, the way we're working is sort of more as a licensing to larger companies who I think they're the ones who are now going to be able to get through quicker. Again, because the stuff we're working on isn't particularly related to COVID, I think we've been more hampered because, as we've heard, lots of clinical trials have been put on hold. I think hopefully in the, you know, looking to the future, once COVID's gone, thanks to the work BioNtech and Moderna and AstraZeneca are doing, we'll hopefully benefit from people having more of an urgency or more acceptance of these really highly technical therapies.
And thanks, James. And back to Arvind, to this, I mean, you had an existing relationship with Pfizer, so that was, I mean, that was a bit of luck, but it was also good fortune or whatever. But the bottom line is that, I mean, not everyone's going to have that partnership ready to go, are they? So, I mean, is there any thoughts about the model and into the future of having a partner who can do the heavy lifting of development, and should people be licensing, just get it out early to pharma, and then you'll be ready to do the sort of expensive clinical work? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Wish it was that easy. I think good science, good solid science with a decent controlled experiment still covers you. For investors, they want to see solid science, but they also want to see a solid plan, right? Their fear is you're being too academic. They want to see how efficient and smart you can be to get in the clinic, thought about risk and managed it. And then it also depends on the type of VCs you get in your group. And they each have different views, whether you go quick or you do slow. But if you're a platform technology, you need proof of concept. If you're a one-trick pony and you want to get into the market, then you need to get to the clinic as quickly as possible so you can sell it. So there is still, the basic rules still apply. Good science still holds. That's what the name of the game is.
But there's also something about, you know, I can remember trying to sell an anti-inflammatory where I was up to about the 13th animal model of pain, where I was still being asked to do 14, 15, and 16. So
well, that's because it's pain.
Yeah, but there's many indications like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, and of course, you could have gone forward after 3, saved yourself a couple of years. So there's something about wanting to put the microscope tighter on the earlier work, or letting it flow into development. I mean, it's
maybe not the earlier work. I think a lot of these AI companies were just understanding the biology. So you have a surrogate or a secondary indicator that de-risks your approach. You can say, okay, I mean, we use spike protein. We didn't use a whole virus to give you the vaccine. So you're saying, okay, we've put the spike protein in and now we've got antibodies to the vaccine. That's not how normal, you know, it's not you're not doing arthritis models for inflammation, right? Here you're just saying, you're using a surrogate saying if you have antibody to the spike, it will destroy the vaccine. So I think understanding the biology is key as well. And I think that can de-risk your approach.
Tony,
so
a couple of things. We're coming to the end of the panel, and for questions and answers, and also think about putting your light on in a sec, or do you need me to come around to do that for you?
No, I need that. I've got a power cut behind me. So don't worry, Graham. I'm like a ghost. So back to the group. I mean, let's open it up for general discussion. So if we go to the chat room, have we got?
Yeah, I think Viren, you've got a question first, have you? Viren, you there? We can't hear you, Viren.
Where's Viren?
Hi, I'm here. Hi.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So yes, I think my question actually a couple of other people in the chat have asked a similar one. So let me just sort of pose it maybe more broadly to the panel. You know, in the last 5-7 years or 10 years, we've seen a lot of activity. You know, the whole field of cell and gene therapy has exploded in the last few years. We've had a lot of capital come in. COVID has sort of almost given a sugar high to the industry. So the question I have is, once you know, once we are past this phase, once people have been vaccinated, you know, there's herd immunity, everyone's forgotten about COVID, we're back, everyone's back to their own lives. Outside of the biotech industry, everyone's back to their own lives. Will they still remember us in the biotech industry, or will they still remember, or will it be back to sort of everyone struggling, you know, bacterial resistance still being a sort of 20-year initiative to solve, you know, only the few rare and sort of these, as I think Tony, you said, you know, the sort of the $200,000 price tag medicines getting funded and so on. So are we going to go back to that? What do the panelists feel? Is everything good? Is this a one-time change for the good, or is it one-time change and one and done kind of thing where once COVID is over, we're back to where it was?
Can I ask Fabio to give a?
Yeah. I was gonna take. I was gonna ask. Yeah, I was gonna take it. Thank you, Ian. That's a very interesting question. So let's put it this way. In my opinion, even after this hype, things won't be exactly back to normal. First of all, if you look at some of the cell therapy products, even the ones that were thought not to be so successful, like now, like for example, it could be multistem by Theolytics in the US or Pluristem in Israel. Those products were in clinical trials. The efficacy was unknown. Now both companies have a program to treat acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is one of the causes of death of patients with COVID. So in a way, this fueled and encouraged more companies to use their cell therapy product, certainly for like to treat the side effects of COVID. If you look even at the stock price, that did increase, even doubled or tripled in case of Pluristem, for example. So I think some of this company after the hype will come back with more capital, and probably some of them even succeed. What I feel though is that the downside is that far too companies are trying to use and adapt their asset to COVID or to treat side effects of COVID. And when the market gets too crowded, and then it becomes difficult to stand out. So probably some of these companies, whether it's in cell therapy or other therapeutic disease, might be hurt and might get outburned. The industry as a whole, I think it will be stronger, and people will realize that this cell therapy product, even the traditional MSCs, might actually be useful.
Yeah, thanks, great. I'm going to ask the next question of Peck. Is it Peck?
Peck, yes.
Peck.
Hi, thanks. This has been a super interesting panel, and I was wondering about the some of the reported adverse events or serious, adverse events that was a result of the vaccines, whether it be from, the BioNtech Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine. Any thoughts on that, and whether this is something that is, RNA vaccine specific, and how do we, as an industry that is interested in RNA therapeutics, kind of address that?
I don't think we know what the causes yet are. So I know they're looking into it, and it's not my expertise, so I can't really comment, but I don't think we know what it is. There was an article somewhere saying that it was pegs that were causing some of the issues, but I don't know whether it was the RNA specific, and I don't think people know. So I think there will be a lot of work. And I think in the pandemic, what it's going to do is allow, unfortunately, an awful lot of people to be tests, and you will have a lot of that data and know how to deal with it in the future, because you're injecting millions, right, of people. So the data set you'll generate will obviously help solve that problem, whatever it may be, whether it be the RNA or the lipid or the cap or whatever component it is.
Right. Okay. So we're going to go to Tom next, and then we're going to finish the questions with Alison. So Tom, you got a question? Take yourself off mute. Are you there? Yep.
Yeah. You know, my question, you know, although I think this, you know, science, as I said before, is revolutionary. But my question is on the manufacturing, because 100 years ago, I worked on a coronavirus, a coronavirus virus, which was infectious bronchitis in chickens, which is a single, you know, stranded RNA. And in those days, we used hundreds and hundreds of thousands of eggs, you know, basically to produce, you know, the vaccine. And that was the same for the smallpox vaccine, which I worked on. So my question to Philip is really, what has revolutionized the manufacturing base of, you know, these, you know, vaccines? I lectured on these, you know, once only use, you know, systems, you know, which were used in the antibody days and still are. So what's the technology, Philip, that's really allowed you to step up, you know, with regard to the production of these vaccines?
Well, I think, as I said before, these are a new class of vaccines that are coming in. They were originally designed for cell and gene therapy sites. So, you know, we've been working with DNA for 20 years. Viral vectors, similar, and it's really the work of research in terms of how you manage those cells, understanding how you grow those cells, the technology around the bioreactors, the growth parameters, and also the type of cells you use too. I mean, the understanding in all, it's hundreds of different fields that are coming together, from cell biology to engineering. And I'll talk about, you know, in terms of bioreactor impellers, the different mixing ratios. We know that bacterial cells behave differently to mammalian cells, and then when you're looking right through to the downstream processing and the purification, the number of technologies available there has increased phenomenally. The interesting aspect that you didn't ask about was the testing side.
That was my second question.
Because we've got the hardware. I think we understand the cell culture. There's a lot of understanding of the downstream processing. The weakness in all this is the testing side, the assays. We haven't focused enough resources on developing suitable, fast assays for these type of products, and that's where we are at the moment. And I think that's one of the big areas that hopefully out of this pandemic will be boosted. You can't develop a process without suitable assays. It's just not possible. And in terms of speeding up how we develop processes, that is certainly one of the keys. We've got the hardware, we've got the software, you know, we've got the money, we've got the facilities. We need those assays to help us fast track process development, basically.
Right. Okay. Final question from Alison, and then we're going to go into a break.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. So one of the things that was very notable that you said you could switch in and out cassettes in terms of variants. And one of the questions I had is whether we could do, as in with bispecific antibodies, whether we could put cassettes for anti-flu if you found that this strain of flu and the COVID at the same time, because everybody gets asked when they are tested, have they have the flu shot? And whether we can expand the market and by putting in more than one cassette and putting in a flu and a COVID cassette, or maybe potentially if COVID expands and it all doesn't go to the spike protein on a negative sense, more than one cassette. So it's just a poly pill, so to speak, in a vaccine.
Sorry, there's no reason not to. I think in the cancer space, they are doing, multiple people are doing multiple RNAs. There's no reason not to. I think it's just like any combination therapy. How much of each one do you need? Does it target to the right? I think all those questions in biology are important, but there's no reason why you couldn't have a cocktail vaccine. I don't think.
Right. From a drug development point of view, it might be more difficult, though. It certainly will make things more challenging.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay, a very, very quick one from James, actually.
Okay.
We're just
last one, James.
James to Arvind.
Yeah. I just had we're talking about plug and play, the plug and play nature, and how that's something that's useful for if there's a new variant of COVID that you can swap in a new spike protein. But I was wondering if regulators had responded to that. And let's say in the vaccine is 99% the same, you've changed a couple codons in the RNA. Is there going to be sort of an accelerated clinical pathway, or do you still have to go back to the beginning? It's like a threshold difference that they're thinking about.
That's a good idea, good question. Arvind.
So I think in the same way as apparently, if you look what we've heard or what's been in the media about is if you look at the way flu vaccine is done every year, it's only minor changes to the various proteins that we do. And so they have a cycle and a different process for approval. Actually, Charlotte, you may not know, you're a virologist. So I think with the flu vaccine, they know the change and there's a process for approval that they do a mini trial to show that it's effective against that particular flu virus, right? Charlotte, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think they probably do the same here.
I can answer. I'm regulatory affairs. So basically, as Arvind said, so you have to bridge. You're not going to do your whole thing, but because it's smaller changes, then it's a smaller, you bridge, but it's a smaller package and goes faster. So instead of 12 months, it could be 3 months or 4 months, depends on the territory.
Fantastic. And it just proves if we don't know, someone in our community does. So thank you, Anna. That was very helpful. Yeah. We need to move to our next phase, Graham.
We do. We're going to have a little break, aren't we?
Before we do, I'm going to thank them in a traditional way. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Philip, to Fabio, Arvind, Panteli, Charlotte, and James. I think I covered everyone. Thanks again, and maybe you come back at another later event to keep us updated, because we're always interested.
Thanks.
We're going to take a small break where I'm going to find a light bulb.
Small break, and we are just going to do 5 minutes. So we're going to go 5 past 5.
5 past 5, and then we're back, right? We dial back into the same Zoom link, Graham?
Just keep your thing live. Just don't disconnect. You can turn your video off and mute yourself. Yeah, Tom, mute yourself this time, because we heard everything last time.